This took place in February of 1988 when I was just 8 years old. I am now approaching my mid-40s. I still have massive anxiety when I think back to that night. For context, I am a male and have always been the shortest person in my class with a smaller body frame. I was living with my mom, my stepdad, and older sister. Because my parents were extremely poor, we found ourselves moving around quite a bit. At the time the story took place, we were renting a rundown duplex in Utah. I am fairly confident that this took place on a Wednesday evening, as that was the weekday my family would gather around the television and watch America's Most Wanted. After the TV show had ended around 9 p.m., we said our goodnights and headed off to our own bedrooms. It was a school night, so I often went to bed around 9. Our duplex had 3 bedrooms, 2 on the main floor and 1 in the basement. My room was on the main floor down the hall from the living room, while my mom and stepdad's bedroom was adjacent to mine at the end of the hallway. My older sister had her room in the basement. At that age, I was fearful of the dark, so I often slept with my bedroom light on, allowing for perfect vision. Because my parents never paid their bills anyway, they never had an issue with this, as most parents might. We also had a false sense of security living in a small town in Utah, so we never locked our front door. However, my mom and her husband always had a lock on their bedroom door and made sure to lock it every night so we kids wouldn't come in unexpectedly. I remember drifting off to sleep shortly after laying down. It must have been around 1 a.m. when I was abruptly awakened from a particular noise in my room. As I sat up in my bed responding to the noise, I was horrified to see 2 grown men sporting biker beards and easily towering 6 feet tall standing in my bedroom doorway. Again, I was able to see every detail of these slovenly men because my light had been left on. The men standing in the doorway were blocking me in my room so as to not run past them. They both had the most evil stare directly into my eyes that I have ever seen. I was petrified. I don't know why I did this, but in a moment of complete shock, I jumped up from my bed onto my feet, but only then did it dawn on me that my little body was not going to be able to get past them. My parents' room was directly towards their backs, and my first instinct was to run to their room. Looking back at it now, I realized it would have done no good, since how they slept securely and comfortably behind their locked bedroom door while this was taking place. Once my body motions caught up to my thought process, I instead ran to the corner of my room and crouched down. All the meanwhile, the 3 of us are awkwardly staring at each other. I tried to let out a scream to call for my parents, but this would be the only time in my life where I was paralyzed with fear. My vain attempts to scream mounted into silent desperation. I didn't know what these people wanted, and I could only imagine the worst. One of the men pushed his index finger to his lips in order to signal me to remain quiet. As I tremble with fear, the second man reaches into his pocket and pulls out a 6-inch blade. My room is fairly small, and they are both standing within 4 feet of me. He makes sure to swallow the knife in the air to make a point that he's not afraid to gut me like a fish. I nearly pissed my pajamas. Another attempt to scream yields nothing. Shortly after, they close my bedroom door on me, and I am left alone. Instinctively, I thought they were robbing our house, but now that they were exposed and had threatened me, they now would leave. Boy, was I wrong. I waited a few minutes. Do I open the door and try to pound on my parents' bedroom door? Are they waiting for me behind the closed door? Who knows? After a few minutes, I gathered what little courage I could and decided to crawl back in my bed and place the sheet over my entire body to wait it out. Were they planning on killing my family? I asked myself. Did they leave yet? What do they want? My anxiety grew as the thoughts continued to race through my mind. As I lay there intently listening for any sounds, I could hear them moving about the house and opening and closing various kitchen drawers. The walls were paper thin in that cheap duplex, so every move was easily heard. Next, I hear them make their way down the stairs to the basement where my sister is sleeping. As I am listening to every frightening sound, I hope with all my might that my stepdad would wake up. He was a fairly large man, and these creeps weren't exactly being super quiet. This goes on for nearly an hour. I'm lying petrified in bed, listening to their every move. To my horror, my entire family is sleeping through the entire ordeal. After some time, I heard the front door shut and the early winter sun is rising. My stepdad worked in a factory and usually woke up at 5 a.m. I couldn't wait to hear my parents unlock their bedroom door. As soon as I heard their alarm, I left my room. I was hysterical while trying to explain what had just happened. Next, my sister woke, and I desperately wanted her to tell me about her night by herself in the basement. My parents tried their best to calm me down. Tears were running down my face. I had been traumatized. To my disbelief, my parents chalked it up to having a bad dream. In fact, I was told this was not possible because if anything like that were ever happen, surely they'd wake up. My sister saw the desperation in my eyes and knew this was serious. Her and I went through our entire house to look for items that may have been stolen. We came across her dresser drawers left half open, and many personal items were out of place. This was enough evidence for her to become just as frightened. Because nothing was missing from our house, my parents didn't bother calling the police. I was made to go to school as though nothing had ever happened. Fast forward a couple of weeks, we are watching TV and an update comes on about a criminal being captured that was featured in Most Wanted. My heart sank when I recognized the mugshot on the TV as one of the men in my room. Of course, disclosing this to my parents only made them believe me less. To this day, I still hold some resentment towards my parents. While they slept peacefully behind the locked bedroom door, I was being victimized. Needless to say, I never sleep without locking my door. Almost a year ago, I was fresh out of college and had moved into an apartment with my middle school bestie and her fiance. This was after a long period of not seeing her in person. My bestie and I had a long and great relationship, with very few rocky periods. I didn't know her fiance well, but I had met him a couple of times. He came off as rude and loud, but mostly nice enough. I let a lot of little annoying behaviors slide because she was so in love with him. I really just wanted to spend time with my best friend. Over the course of a few months, I slowly discovered that she was trapped in an abusive relationship with the most classic example of a malignant narcissist imaginable. Their fights, really just him raging at her while she cried, escalated to the point where he completely trashed the apartment, breaking her phone and laptop, hiding her keys, blocking the door, and grabbing her arms so hard she had bruises, all while hurling out the worst insults he could fathom at the top of his lungs for hours. This man's about a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, so there was nothing I could do other than give her a ride somewhere else away from him until the next day. He didn't like it when I did that. Once it reached the point of physical harm against her, I put my foot down and demanded that he move out, or else I would call the cops. He wasn't technically signed onto the lease, so I could have him kicked out. He begged for time to find a new place. He was extremely drunk and high the night he hurt her, and he promised to stay sober until he moved. Not wanting to escalate things, I agreed on the condition that nothing like that ever happened again. My friend and her fiance broke up soon after that. 3 weeks passed and everything is going great. Ex-fiance has found a new place, is training for a new job, and while still loud and inconsiderate, he hasn't caused any problems so far. I get ready for bed early. I have an important meeting early tomorrow. I put on some comfy pajamas, locking my door before I change out of habit. My bestie is out working, and it's just me upstairs in bed, and ex-fiance downstairs yelling on the phone about something. I tune him out and try to sleep. He's moving out next week. My chest rattles from the booming footfalls up the stairs to my room, waking me from my sleep. My eyes snap open to see my bedroom doorknob rattling back and forth. He lets out a yell of pure malice and bangs on my door. He screams my name, and is so slurred he sounds like he's trying to impersonate a lizard man. The hinges aren't looking so good. We lived in a crappy cheap apartment with thin doors. I have to do something before he breaks open the door, right? I say the only thing I could think of. What the fuck? Suddenly, the banging and screaming stops. My doorknob falls still. After a terrifying moment of silence, he says flatly, "Open the door, bud. Just come open the door." I still laugh about that one. Like after all that, I just walk over and open up. Instead, I grabbed my essentials and jumped out the window. I was on the second floor, but we lived on a hill, so the fall wasn't quite that high. I still managed to fall wrong though. I hobbled as quickly as I could to my car and peeled away. I called my best friend and warned her not to go home. We made plans for her to stay with a friend after she got off work. I made it to the friend's house and passed out for a few hours. I woke up to a call from my bestie. He traveled all the way to her workplace with a knife and broke in. He assaulted her and held the knife up to her special needs client's throat and said he'd kill him in front of her. Thank God a coworker overheard everything in another room and was able to call the police in time for everyone to come out alive. My bestie also said he was on the phone with her while he was banging on my door, and he said he was going to kill me and make her listen. I was totally alone in the apartment with them, sleeping upstairs in my bed. If I hadn't locked my door that night, would I even still be alive? If I had left my keys downstairs, would I have been able to get away? When I returned to my apartment the next morning, my bedroom door was completely kicked in. My belongings were scattered everywhere, and the large butcher knives were missing from the kitchen, instead sitting in the corner of the hallway to my room. My sibling and I lived close to an elementary school where we would often go to walk our dog in the playing field and crop up the woods, or we would like our dogs to roam around while we played on the playground or made pretend in the woods. I think I was around 14 when this happened, about 10 years ago. This schoolyard had a playing field, a playground near the building, and a playground further away from the building in the crop of the trees. We were swinging on the swing set at this more distant playground, but from this play area, you can clearly see the residential streets and the parking lot of the school, which kind of all wrap around the crop of the forest. As we are swinging, I see an SUV drive up one of the roads and pull into the parking lot. It's a weekend, so there's no other cars around and not very many people. Maybe the odd passerby also walking their dog through the school grounds. The SUV is about 40 meters from where we are, and I wear glasses, so I can't see very well what people look like as they exit the car, but I can see some distinct clothing pieces. There are 3 people. 2 look older and are dressed as if they are older middle-aged, like in their 50s. I remember one of these people was wearing a wide-brimmed women's sun hat. The third person looked like an older teen or young adult in his 20s and is wearing a green and white striped jersey and cleats. It is not uncommon for people to walk or drive to the school to use its field for play or sports practice. Though, looking back at it now, I realize it is odd that they park in this lot and not on the side of the road nearer to the field, which is on the opposite side of the property. In any case, I think, okay, just some grandparents and their grandson going to practice in the field and go about playing with my sibling. I remember watching the trio walk away around the school building, completely opposite to where we were on the property. We have our dog with us, and after a time, we decide to stop swinging and take the dog on a walk through the trails and the forest brush. Maybe 15 or 20 minutes have passed since the car pulled up. The brush we are walking in is basically in the very corner of the school property. There is a metal chain link fence in front of us, and beyond it is the sidewalk and residential road. To our right is another fence which separates people's backyards from the school grounds. These homes all have tall trees growing along the school fence for added privacy, so it's almost impossible for anyone to see into the schoolyard. My sibling and I were just at that age where playing pretend didn't feel genuine, and spur of the moment, like we were about to grow out of it. I'm feeling bored, but don't want to go home yet, so I pick a branch of these red berries that grow in the schoolyard and say to my sibling, "Hey, wanna play a game?" Which was our code for "let's play pretend," and I bent down to offer the berries to my dog as a starting point for the game. I'm still speaking to my sibling, who is walking in front of me as I bend down, but my voice trails off as I see my dog's behavior. She is completely ignoring the berries and me, and is instead moving past me slowly, ears back and nose pointed, as if she is approaching something. I follow her movements, still looking down. When I finally look up, there are the 3 people from the SUV, not 2 meters in front of me. They are certainly not a couple of grandparents and a kid, but 3 grown men. I remember the faces of the 2 older men pretending to be grandparents. The foremost man had short white hair and a white scruff of facial hair. His mouth was open in a faint O shape as he breathed quietly and focused on keeping his steps light. The other man was extremely thin, his cheekbones popping out, and shoulder-length, greasy brown hair hung around his skeletal features. They had crept up behind my sibling and I silently and remained just as quiet as they all turned their backs quietly and pretended to point off into the trees like they were bird watching or something. It was bizarre how silent the whole encounter was. I immediately realized we need to get the fuck out of there and turned my attention back to my siblings as I grabbed my dog's collar and get her hooked up to the leash. My sibling is about a foot from me, but seems oblivious still to the 3 creeps in the woods right behind us. I tell them over and over that we need to leave, but they become wrapped up in the imaginary game I proposed moments ago. Finally, they see the men. I never look back at the creeps, only to my sibling. My sibling also stops talking and starts walking with me. Thankfully, an opening in the fence between these now haunted woods and the road is only a few meters ahead, and we get some distance and obstacles between us and these creeps. To my frustration, my sibling wants to stop on the sidewalk and pick some more berries through the fence, and I frantically tell them to come on, let's go. I still never look back towards the men, my vision tunneling to the safety of the open roads and the sidewalk and homes in front of us. We get home without incident, at least to my knowledge. Had the men followed us on foot, gone back to their car and followed, or simply gave up? I didn't care. I just wanted to get home, which was only a couple of blocks away. When we got home, I broke down. I told my mom what happened, and I remember her reaction being kind of nonchalant. I had always been an anxious kid, and she had developed a habit of downplaying things in a kind of exposure therapy way. I realized I didn't feel fully safe with this reaction and retreated to my basement to cry alone. In recounting this story with my mom years later, she said she did call the police, but nothing came of it. I am also very thankful for my dog, as it is likely that she saved the lives of myself and my sibling that day. In the years since then, I became highly skilled in reading people's body language. I can tell when someone is lying. I can read people's emotions and intentions like a book. I can tell if someone's vibe is off from a good distance away. This has become a blessing and a curse. So 3 fucking creeps from the woods, I hope no one else was subjected to your presence. And I hope you rot in hell for what you did.